Hey everyone, Tony D with a hot take about, well, I guess you could call it the collapse of Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren's candidacies. They seem to be going at each other pretty good. I don't think either one of them really had a shot. Bernie, maybe, if they had combined forces. But it looks like things have gotten really nasty between the two and between their supporters, which spells kind of doom and gloom for the Democrats in general because with those two fighting, those two had similar, voting blocks. They could have combined easier than some of the other groups, right? So, and they had, even though Elizabeth Warren's sort of fallen apart, she still had a sizable enough following that throwing her weight behind Bernie would have put him on top. Now it looks like this was just a last ditch effort to kneecap him right after the debate. So I watched the debate. I watched the streaming of the debate with Razor Fist on YouTube, which was a lot of fun. And, you could kind of see that there was a lot of tension there with that question. This whole idea that Bernie Sanders is sexist, number one, it's just not true. He's just not that kind of guy. He has a long record of being super progressive. So the idea that he's been some sort of misogynist this whole time is really just, it just goes to show you how extreme things have gotten on the progressive end. They're just looking for any reason to smear someone. And what's really at play here is something that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. It's this whole idea of the Me Too movement. And, there are women who have been through terrible trauma because of men, but there are also men who have been through trauma. Lots of people have been through trauma. And the idea that this was ignored in the past, it's just not true. There was just different ways that it was dealt with in the past. Back in my, my dad's age and before, if somebody assaulted a girl, a bunch of her relatives, cousins, male cousins, would get into a car, go find the guy, and beat the crap out of him. Now, I'm not suggesting people should go back to that or anything, but the point is, it wasn't just swept under the rug by men. People protected their families, and while that was not by any means a fair and just system of punishing people, it acknowledges that this isn't men versus women. I think the problem with the Me Too movement, and the progressives in general, they've become so hostile to men that Me Too is women on one side, men on the other, and that's not the way it should be. Now, there are allies of feminism or feminist or Me Too or whatever you want to call them, but I feel like those allies are so, there's no other word for it really, cucked, that they have, some of them have ulterior motives, first off. I mean, there's, been a rash of guys who support feminism so much that really they're using it as an in to get in with girls. And there's been problems in that area. There's been issues in the comic book industry about that. I don't want to get into the whole thing. But my point is, this is, it's a difficult topic, but we have to acknowledge a salient fact that people in the progressive movement really refuse to, I think, acknowledge in a significant way. And that is, some women use the Me Too movement or things like it, feminism, whatever, they use their gender as a cudgel to beat men with. And that's, I think, exactly what Elizabeth Warren did. I think she did that knowing she was lying, knowing that it would hurt Bernie, and only because she's a woman and he's a man. And I think that's really, really unfair of her. Now, I think she's being punished in the public square. But Bernie, who I don't support, I think is being unfairly damaged too by this. Now, he's also being damaged by his own little scandal, which I talked about in a previous video. But, you know, it's really complicated, and it's time that I think as a society we have to talk openly about these things, and that we have a system in which there has to be proof of these Me Too allegations. Now, you take a guy like Harvey Weinstein. There seems to be like a ton of proof. This guy's going down, I think, I hope. So that's good that he's going down for what he did. If there's not proof, I mean, you have to get on board. I think the Me Too movement has to get on board with the concept of Western justice, which is there has to be evidence and proof. There just has to be. And it's unfortunate that guilty men may go free. It's unfortunate that, there are people who skirt the law, and maybe they're very vulgar and crass, and, for women are uncomfortable with that. But we have to acknowledge that it's not a crime. It's just a jerky way to behave. And that line of jerkiness versus, well, now you've gone too far, it, again, is something, it wasn't ignored in the past. I mean, I'm old enough to remember, an era where women would get slapped in the behind in public places and guys said sexist things to them. It wasn't always the end of the world. And in fact, sometimes it was just playful banter. Now, you could argue that, well, of course it was playful banter. Women couldn't say anything. No, I mean, it wasn't like, women in the 70s were, trapped in chains. It just was the way people communicated. It was a little looser. Yeah, sometimes people went too far. Terrible things happened, but that was not the norm by any stretch. It wasn't the norm. And sometimes people make mistakes. Sometimes things are misinterpreted. So, we have to have a real discussion about this, and it's really difficult. It's just, I think you have to just, the most neutral arbiter that we have is the sort of justice system. So it's a court system, and that's what we have. So, if you could take somebody to court and prove your case, then that person will be punished appropriately. And if you can't, then you have to just move on and make the best of it. That's all. What else are you going to do? If you want to go back to the days of vigilante justice, that's a way to do it. But there was also people who, that provided its own set of problems. Sometimes the wrong guy got beat up. So sometimes and we have to acknowledge there's all sorts of women in the mix with their own agendas. Sometimes they're really nasty agendas, and sometimes they're just scared and do, stupid things. Young people do stupid things. I was young. I did stupid things. I'm old. I still kind of do some stupid things once in a while. So we just have to kind of talk and make the best of it. And this screaming on the internet isn't really helping anything. You have the power to not vote for Elizabeth Warren if you think she shafted Bernie Sanders, and I think a lot of people do. I think she lied about him, and you know, I think you should vote appropriately. That to me is the appropriate punishment. And beyond smearing him, well, there's not a lot you could do about that. It's politics. People get smeared all the time. But, you know, in the future, I think if we're going to finally have a female president, we need someone who's willing to address that issue. Because it has to come from someone like that. It has to come from a woman to say, you know, I'm a supporter of women, I'm a supporter of Me Too, but it can go too far. And we have to acknowledge that, you know, it's part of the problem with the left side of politics in general. They don't have a limit to when things go too far. The idea of progressivism, you know, was always kept in check by the conservative side of politics, and they always sort of kept them down. And now that has sort of disappeared, you know, and the battles that the left side of politics fought were won, and maybe it's time to acknowledge that the Democratic Party, as a party, as an ideology, has outlived its usefulness. And maybe it's time for a Republican and, say, more libertarian type party, one that's more classically liberal. As for the socialist, I know you think you have a shot at this, and you maybe do if Warren you know, threw her weight behind Bernie, but I don't think that's going to happen. And at the end of the day, you know, socialism has failed many, many times. I think this is probably going to be its last hurrah in the United States. With Bernie, I don't see really anybody picking up the torch after him. And if you think that if by some miracle he gets the nomination, you know, I think the mere fact that there are elements inside the Democratic Party willing to short-circuit his nomination merely because he's socialist, and I think those elements exist, is a testament to how bad the Democrats realize socialism is, the real Democrats. And to those Democrats, I say, you need to redesign your party, and you need to draw those limits and say, well, this is the Democratic Party, and this is as far left as we go. And once you cross that Rubicon in socialism or communism, you're out. You're not a Democrat anymore. And you have to leave the party and go do your own thing. And we wish you well, but Democrats believe this, you know, not the super hardcore red stuff. Anyhow, that's my take.